Your host, Tariq Mendez, takes you on a journey with guests from all around the world. Broadcasting around the world. Around the world. This is Tariq Talk.
All right, so we're at the studio and we're going to get an amazing tour of this beautiful sculpture that I'm so happy to hear all about it.
Well, this sculpture was actually produced for a show in response to the sculptor Auguste Rodin, if you're familiar with the Thinker statue.
Oh, yes.
And this was shown last year at the Cincinnati Art Museum as part of an exhibition that I developed in response to his legacy and thinking about sculpture from just before modernism to now, which I would say is like the end of modernism. And so she was made in response to one of the burghers of Calais, which you can see an image of how it was displayed in the exhibition in the museum. And that is Pierre de Wissant, and this sculpture he produced in the late 1800s.
Wow.
And so my sculpture is sort of the same exact height and scale, and that's why she's one of the most figural sculptures I've done so far, because she's responding to his figure. And so they're sort of like mimicking each other in pose, except he's made of bronze, she's made of grass. He's sort of this idea of the heroic figure or this masculinity, and Rodin was very famous for that sculpture group for changing the way we think about the idea of the hero.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that in thinking about climate change and the contemporary moment and sort of like the breaking down of the hero. So this, in a sense, the sculpture is this sort of like the earth itself rising for a moment and then falling back down, and you're just getting to experience her just before she's going to collapse again back into the earth. And like I mentioned earlier, it's an interior structure of maple trees that I interconnect with hundreds of cotton threads at every single intersection. So it ends up making like weirdly a very strong mesh. And then I do different kinds of spontaneous mold making that sort of mimics the form, and then I pour the grass over the scaffold. And the beauty with this material is that I can use sort of mold making techniques with this material, but I can also use it as like a drawing material. So I can keep layering and layering and layering over. And I'm using natural dyes like indigo and turmeric for the very subtle color variations that you're seeing everywhere. And so there's moments in the sculpture where it's, like I said, very botanic and literal and figure, sort of like you can see the strokes of my gestures. That's all I'm working with my hands, sort of with the fibers, layering and layering. But then there's moments here where it's very expressive, and so the marks that you're seeing here are just my fingertips, and I'm like scratching into the material and like being very sort of embodied with it. And I think that range of visual vocabularies where I can play between sort of like the botanic and the gestural is where the sculpture emerges from. The title, I sometimes have pretty long titles for at least my bigger works. All of my sculptures are called field.
Okay.
So field is sort of like this larger idea of maybe the world or the earth or whatever.
Wow.
And then there's subtitles for every piece. And often the titles come from, they may be like the most narrative part of my work, and they come from a memory or an experience that I've had in India, in my travels, or in my journals, note-taking. So the title of this piece is "Pink and red skirts sway like sailing ships over soft rounding hips. Shopkeepers roll down noisy shutters of closing trade stores, and the yellow fire from lamps attracts a million singing mosquitoes over sweet-smelling stalls. Our arms are caged in white bracelets, like knotted driftwood lined with shrieking gulls."
Wow. It really takes you on a journey. Like this already takes you on a journey, but that just like sucks you in.
And
Wow.
so a lot of the titles are not like a direct reference or description of the piece, but more like the world of the piece. And so like that sound of the mosquitoes or of the tea, the chai. So there are these moments where, like, especially in the US, I sometimes feel a kind of dissonance between sort of maybe you and I being here right now and then suddenly being taken back to a moment in my homeland or like a very different cultural context. And so I often see these sculptures as just emerging from that dissonance between place or between like being here and there. And that I think is common to a lot of artists and people who have had a multicultural experience, that sense that like you can't really assimilate. And so a lot of the works sort of identify that context of memory for what you see in the piece.
Wow. And it's so impressive how you're able to connect both moments and bring it into life form and give it an amazing title.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you for listening to Tariq Talk. Follow Tariq Talk on all social media channels and check out the video interviews online.